Hello, community, and welcome back to another Keeping It Real with Dr. Anita podcast. I am your host, Dr. Anita Polite Wilson, C-Suite Trusted Advisor, Elite Team Strategist, and Board Director, preparing organizations to navigate culture, complexity, and change. Here we are into February, and we're celebrating two key activities, Black History Month and Valentine's Day in a couple of weeks. And my very special guest today is Britt Hogue. And we're going to be talking about DEI and the current landscape and what that's going to mean for us in 2025. Britt, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. I have been looking forward to this conversation for a while now. And before we go any further, I would love to know, since we kind of associate February and Valentine's with love, and there's Black History Month, how did you come to having a passion for the work, which is DE&I?
Yeah. Well, I didn't actually start in this place. I work primarily with social sector organizations, so nonprofits, foundations, local government agencies, any organization that's mission driven and community serving. But I started my career in the private sector and actually on Wall Street. So almost the exact opposite. And really what got me to a place where I decided that I needed to make the pivot was a drive around passion. I loved my work. It was challenging. I learned a lot. There were great people around me, but I didn't feel fulfilled by it. I got to a place where I just felt disconnected and like I wanted to do more. I wanted to use my skills to be able to have a real impact in real communities and in people's lives. So I started volunteering with different mission-driven organizations, and eventually just decided to kind of take the plunge and started my consulting firm, The Collective Good. And now we help those organizations with strategy and really figuring out how they are going to move their mission forward. And a big part of that always comes down to DEI and equity specifically.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. When I think of the name of your organization, The Collective Good, and where we are today, it seems like culture is going to be the word that's going to be bringing people together, because somehow or another, diversity has become politicized and polarizing. What are your thoughts on that?
It has, and that's difficult because a word like diversity shouldn't be polarizing, but it has become polarizing, and sometimes that is a bit of political maneuvering that happens there. But I agree with you. I think coming back to culture and simply, calling it what it is, which I've never really drawn a fine line between DEI and culture. I think they're the same at the end of the day. Treating people with respect. It's giving people the things they need to be able to show up as their full selves to do their best work. And that's both culture and DEI. So I hope that we can find ways to shift the conversation back to what brings us together, as opposed to finding ways to use words to drive us further apart.
I agree with you 100%. And further down the line in our conversation, we're going to spend a little more time there. Right now, though, I'm curious to know, what do you find most rewarding about doing the work, and what do you find most challenging?
Well, rewarding is definitely getting to know the organizations and their missions and being able to see their work up close. Being able to work with groups that are helping to address housing affordability and first-time home ownership programs, getting to work with groups that are ensuring that education is an option for everyone, so HBCUs around the country. It just is truly is the highlight. And so when I have those rough days, I'm brought back to the mission of the organization and really what we're helping to support and enable through our work. I think the challenges really are when politics get in the way. Great organizations being able to do great things. And then our work really is to try to figure out, how do you how do we maneuver around it? How do we keep the work moving forward despite distractions?
Yeah. When we think about what keeps us going amid the distractions, whenever I'm speaking with a leader, I like to ask them this one question: how do you feed your leadership soul so that you can keep going every day? What do you do?
Oh, that's a great question. How do I feed my leadership soul? I think, we're a boutique organization, so we're
Mhm.
small enough to still get to talk to each other, all of us in the organization. We all know each other really well. Um, and so I think really what people I like people.
Mhm.
And I like humans connecting with other humans just on a basic level. And so I think what really feeds my soul is whether I'm with the team or with client teams, being able to just talk to people and get to know them.
Mhm.
Especially when things are tough, we can just sort of talk about our weekend or talk about a new podcast that we're listening to, or what are we doing to kind of brighten things up especially when the going gets tough.
Yeah, it's helpful to have folks to commiserate with and just kind of explore different things with. I'm curious, how did you land on the name The Collective Good for your consultancy?
Well, I wanted good in the name,
Hmm.
as that was back to my kind of my personal journey. It was I wanted the purpose to really be central.
Hmm.
And then the collective really came from this idea that I was coming from the private sector into the social sector. And I just had this feeling that there were other people out there like me
Hmm.
who might want to come from all different, industries and different sectors to be able to do this work with me. So from the very start, it was, really intentional that this would be a collective of
Hmm.
people, different skill sets, with different perspectives, different ideas, different abilities, and we would be able to come together to do this good work as one.
I like that. I like that. One last question about you and your work before we actually get into a little bit of the nitty gritty in our next conversation. Tell me about the most satisfying project that you worked on and one where you're like, man, I wish we could have gotten a little different result.
Well, the most satisfying, I'm trying to not get into recency bias because I feel like it's always the last project that's the most
Right.
satisfying
Right.
one.
And that's okay.
We've had some really, really great ones. I will say one of the projects that I tend to come back to as really satisfying because it wasn't just the work that we did with that client, which was now probably 7 or 8 years ago,
Mhm.
but it's the lasting effect um, that organization has had, in part us, but also all of their good work. Um, is an affordable housing developer in the Northern Virginia area where affordable housing is a real challenge, like many other parts of the country, unfortunately now, but especially there. Um, and they were a small organization that was not a diverse organization. It was basically a board-led organization that had a few staff members, um, but obviously a really powerful mission. And were very well connected throughout the city so that they had all the tools to be able to have a much bigger impact than what they were having.
Mhm.
And we were able to work with them and help them develop a strategic plan for the future on how they were going to build the organization, sort of shift their board into more of a strategic board than a working board, and be able to really position themselves to develop more housing for Alexandrians. And uh, I would say the biggest kind of pivot point in the project was our approach is always to lead with the community voice.
Mhm.
So we brought them, you know, to their properties and said, we've got to have conversations with the residents about what matters, what doesn't matter, what do they need, what's going well, what's not going so well. And we had we repositioned the organization as a community developer. Rather than a housing developer, they were a community developer, because they really started to see themselves as an extension of the community. And what they were doing was actually addressing many different community needs. It's not just housing. So could they use their rec room for an after-school program? Could they use their relationships with the city to advocate for, different types of commercial use near the property, so that we could have a grocery store as opposed to something else? And so for me, that's one that really stands out as they did really good work in that project, but then it really changed the whole trajectory of the organization in a really powerful way. And now the organization is, I think they're approaching 40 people. So not a huge organization, but considering they had 2 before.
Wow.
Approaching 40 people. They have several rental buildings in the Alexandria area. They've started a home ownership program for folks. So it's just really powerful.
Congratulations. Well, let's just end on that high note. We won't go in the other direction. I do want to highlight that the fact that you said leading with a community voice, and that reminds me of the importance of human affirming behaviors and community. When we come back for our second conversation with Britt Hogue, founder and CEO of The Collective Good, we're going to ask a little more specific questions related to the DEI landscape. So you're going to want to come back for this conversation. In the meantime, please stay in the flow with me. Follow, like, and overshare any conversation that helps you to reframe hot topic conversations from difficult to different. Until next time, this is Dr. Anita reminding you to stay blessed and keep it real.